Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Audrey. Great to see you, Audrey. We have Killer. Thanks for moderating, Killer. We have Raven 1983 Witch. Great to see you. Enzo the God. Great to have you on, Enzo. Colin. Great to see you. Arl. Great to have you on. Adrian. Great to see you. Chatty Rat. Great to have you on once again. Gene T. Great to see you. We have Norflinger. Great to have you on. Nico. Great to have you on too. Young Ralph. Great to see you. Mad Monk. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. We have the Highlander. Great to see you. We also have Derek, Roisin, Giblets, Buxton. Great to see you, Buxton. We have, let me see, who else have we got? City Dweller. We also have Audrey. Great to see you. Maximenius. We have Philippe. Great to see you. Fearless Wolf. Hope you're well. Giovanni, great to see you, and so many more. Hope you're all very well tonight. Hope you had a good week, and welcome to the live stream. A number of things we're going to talk about. Brexit, of course, Rwanda as well. There's some breaking news on that, and a number of different, the cost of living as well. But I wanted to start off with this story here that which was interesting. It says here, Lib Dems accuse Johnson of hiding from voters in Tiverton and Honiton by-elections. So there's a by-election just around the corner, and there are two actually. One is likely to go Labour's direction, Labour's favour, and the other is likely to go in favour of the Liberal Democrats. And it says here, Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, accused Boris Johnson on Friday of hiding from the people of Tiverton and Honiton. Johnson was visiting the constituency on Friday afternoon, but no details of his visit were made public in advance. So, you know, once again, it's almost like Scotland, where Johnson is smuggled in, smuggled out. What's the point in visiting a constituency if you're not actually going to meet with the public? The first confirmation that he was actually in Devon was a tweet from the NFU official that said Johnson had been there discussing food security. And there's a picture here. A picture here of Boris Johnson with some farmers. I presume he has apologized to these farmers for Brexit, or maybe he hasn't. It goes on to say the North Devon MP Selena Saxby revealed in a tweet that the farm had been near Axminster and posted a picture of the Prime Minister around biscuit heavy okay, farmhouse table. And this is just a general picture, okay. Davey said, the fact that he's not talking to ordinary people, no one seems to know where he is. He might be coming down here, but people aren't seeing him. He's hiding away from people, and I think that says it all. He's taking this constituency for granted. We're picking up people who are fed up with being taken for granted. And it'd be wonderful, yeah, if the Tories lose this constituency and the other one as well in the by-elections just around the corner. But the idea that, yeah, Boris Johnson is meeting with farmers. Of course, he'd meet with a selected group of farmers, people who would be, okay, are you a fan of Boris Johnson? No. Okay, you're not coming to this meeting. Are you a fan of Boris Johnson? Yeah, he's doing his best. Okay, yeah, you can come along and have a chat with him, and we'll have a photo with him. Not a huge group in this photo. There are more cows in the photo than people. Gives you the impression maybe, you know, Boris Johnson's support within the farming industry is quite slim. Really, I would like to actually know why a farmer would continue to support the Tories, considering what they're doing to them at the moment. Buzz is dressed up as a criminal. Oh, it's the Prime Minister. Paid actor farmers, maybe. Boris Johnson can't be filmed in public. Have you heard that Patel is sending a 13-year-old girl seeking asylum to Ukraine on her own to die? No, I didn't know about that. I'll look into that. Maybe to Rwanda. Are you a fan of Boris Johnson? Leave him alone. He's doing his best. This way, please. Yes. No need for Boris to dress up. He's already looks like, he looks similar to Wurzel Gummidge. Yeah, so cars, farmers and a donkey in the photo. Okay, so I wanted to move on to that story, not that particular story, but the breaking news about, well, we'll start off with this breaking news from Sky News about the UK High Court has given Patel the permission to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, it seems.
The judge has now handed down his judgment. He has said that the application is refused, that flights will go ahead. They can go ahead, and that flight that is due to depart from the UK to Rwanda on Tuesday will depart. And that means that the 30+ asylum seekers who are supposed to be on board will be heading to East Africa. What it doesn't mean, though, is that there won't be a judicial review, because that application was lodged a few days ago, on Wednesday actually, by various claimants. That may still go ahead.
So it seems what the judge was doing is the judge was saying, okay, we'll wait for we won't wait for a judicial review. What we'll do is we'll send these people anyway. But I think this is going to really open a legal can of worms.
This will be a big blow for campaigners, because they were arguing that the policy was unlawful and that people would be left potentially stranded out in Rwanda, in a country where their asylum claims weren't going to be processed in a fair way. They had argued that the 7 days given to asylum seekers once they're given notice of what's called a removal direction wasn't long enough for them to be able to launch their own objections to it. The UNHCR as well, the UN's refugee agency as well, their lawyer stood up in court today and backed those claimants, saying as well that they didn't think that there was a fair system out there, there was no evidence, and they actually said that despite claims to the contrary, they hadn't been involved with the UK government with regards to the Rwandan arrangement, and they weren't endorsing it either. This is a policy that has been described in the past as a cruel and nasty policy. It's been described by Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, as ungodly. But for the government, there's a lot riding on this. They hope that this is the answer to their immigration issues. They want to be seen to be tough on immigration. Bear in mind that since the start of this year, more than 10,000 asylum seekers have made that dangerous journey across the Channel to get to the UK. It was just a few weeks ago that the Prime Minister said that, despite these claims that Rwanda wasn't necessarily a safe place or the best place for these people to be sent, he said that Rwanda had been totally transformed in recent years.
But the whole point of sending people to Rwanda was it was a deterrent. Wasn't that the point? That they said we need to send people to Rwanda as a deterrent. But it's a wonderful place. It has been reformed.
So what we will be seeing is that asylum seekers will be heading to Rwanda. There are more flights that will be scheduled in the next probably a few weeks maybe, and they will go ahead too. The government has clarified, though, that at the moment they are looking at single lone people to send out. They're not families, but in future they will be looking to send families to Rwanda as well to have their asylum applications processed. And
But I thought they were not going to have their asylum applications processed in Rwanda. And also, I think it breaks UN conventions to send people to Rwanda to be processed for claims that they're making in the United Kingdom.
Their whole argument for all of this was in the public interest, they say. Because they want to deter people from making those unnecessary, illegal and dangerous crossings. Just yesterday, Downing Street said that the Prime Minister was confident that the flights would go ahead. They are committed politically to pursuing this policy, of course, Priti Patel as well. They want to be, as I say, tough on immigration, but this isn't the last legal challenge, rather. This is just the first of many. On Monday, we've also heard from Asylum Aid, another charity, that they will be putting forward their own legal objections, potentially another injunction application, and of course more individuals are putting forward their own claims as well. So it's certainly it's not the last that we've heard with regards to legal challenges on this.
But just quickly, Adele, on the flight itself on Tuesday, as you said, there's more legal challenges to come. There's even another court case in the High Court to be heard on Monday. But the flight that's due to go on Tuesday now goes definitely, or could the cases due on Monday affect that?
As it stands, it's going ahead. Anything can happen, I suppose, between now and then, because, as I said, more legal challenges can be mounted. But I would say that it's a bit too late in the day, unless there are some new legal arguments that they come up with on Monday. They are going ahead.
Look, I'm not a judge, and I still don't understand how it's possible that somebody who wishes to claim asylum in the UK is being deported to Rwanda in order for them, allegedly, to make an asylum claim there. How is that legal? Once again, I'm not a judge, so I don't know how the judge ruled on this. The judge seemed to think that the government is right. But I don't know how you can square that, because under UN conventions, you're supposed to be allowed to make an asylum claim in the country of, you arrive in the UK and you're supposed to be allowed to make an asylum claim there. And the government is picking people up and sending them to Rwanda very quickly in order that they don't have time to process an application, an injunction against it. Something is very fishy about all of this. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. This is shameful, Max. Keep up the top work. It is shameful. Thanks for that super chat. I really don't understand how this is legal. It's the Supreme Court has decided it is, or the High Court, sorry. But I really don't understand how a judge can say, yes, it's okay for the UK government to send these people to Rwanda, to another country, to have their UK asylum claims processed there. It's not legal. Judiciary is not independent in this country. Too much coke corruption. Is the High Court going the same way as the Supreme Court in the US? Can the British government not just make any law and then the judges have to say it's legal? It's the law. Britain doesn't have a codified constitution. That's a problem. Technically, no. The government are not supposed to influence the judiciary. They're meant to be separated. But I know that Boris Johnson has been trying to push through legislation that would allow ministers to override judges. So I don't know. This is not a minister overriding a judge. It seems to be a judge ruling in favor of the government. Now, if this had been any other case, I would have just said, this is the High Court has decided, and this is the rule. But this is obviously in breach of UN conventions.
I'm just hearing more from inside court. The judge has granted applicants leave to appeal, and he says that he believes that provisions have been made for the Court of Appeal to hear it on Monday. So that's probably going to be the next step in all of this. He's also said that a judicial review, a full hearing, should be able to go ahead before the end of July, and that will be to look into more detail as to whether this policy is unlawful. But in the meantime, as I said...
So the people will be sent to Rwanda and then they'll decide if it was lawful or not. So they'll have a judicial review after the people have been sent to Rwanda. Once again, something doesn't sound right here. Something extremely fishy is going on. Just a bit more on that. It says a UK deportation flight to Rwanda can go ahead. High Court judge rules. a High Court judge has ruled that a controversial deportation flight to Rwanda that was due to take off early next week can go ahead. Nico, just to read, thank you so much for that super chat. They're not sent there for processing a UK claim. They are flown to Rwanda, and they can ask for asylum there in Rwanda, for asylum in Rwanda. So that's breaking the law as well, because if somebody arrives in the UK, they should be allowed to make an asylum claim in the UK. So the UK government would be denying them the right to make an asylum claim in the UK. It's not the case that somebody makes an asylum claim and the claim is rejected and then they're sent to Rwanda. They're not being allowed to make an asylum claim in the UK. Thanks for that, Nico. So I was actually under the impression that Rwanda was going to do the asylum claims on behalf of the UK, but that's not the case. It's claiming asylum, but if you're under UN conventions, you should be allowed to make a claim in a country of your choice. Not we're sending you to Rwanda and then you make your claim there, because the people are not wanting to make a claim in Rwanda. Will they be sending Ukrainians to Rwanda? There is actually a story about some Ukraine, or some, I think it was a Tory MP was talking about, yeah, we might send some Ukrainians to Rwanda as well. I'm going to look into that after, but load the entire Tory party onto planes and transport them to Rwanda. They would solve most of the problems that British people have. Yes. And they claim to be great at cooking. They're able to make meals for 30p a meal. They're great at promoting business. Maybe, if Rwanda is having a lot of economic problems, the Tories can help sort it out. Their get up and go spirit. It goes on to say, Mr. Justice Swift Justice, refused to grant interim relief, urgent action in response to an injunction application made by 4 asylum seekers facing offshoring to Rwanda. Lawyers acting for the asylum seekers and the groups had argued the policy was unlawful and sought the urgent injunction to stop next week's planned flight. So as we saw in this report from Sky News, the flight is expected to go ahead next Tuesday, but there may be an appeal on Monday. The decision will not stop individual refugees from further legal challenges to their removal to Rwanda or a judicial review of the policy, which Swift said could take 6 weeks. He supported submissions made by the Home Secretary, Patel, and rejected the application to halt the Rwanda flight next Tuesday, but granted permission to the claimants to appeal, suggesting Court of Appeal judges would hear the case on Monday. So Monday is going to be an interesting day to understand what's actually going to happen. I would imagine it would be overturned by appeal judges, because how are appeal judges going to say this is legal, this is lawful? It's breaking international conventions. If the UK had not signed up to these conventions, then yeah, it'd be well within its rights to do that, because it would be deciding. But it's signed up to UN conventions which permit people to claim asylum in the country of their choice. So if somebody arrives in the UK and they want to claim asylum in the UK, their claim has to be processed there. They can't be sent to somewhere else. Doesn't mean that they won't try and do it. Doesn't mean that the government won't try and do it. And what's probably going to happen here is, if it does eventually go ahead, in a few years' time, you're going to see legal cases and class actions taken against the UK government, a future UK government, and they're going to end up paying out compensation to people who were wrongfully removed. I can guarantee it. The taxpayer will have to pick up the tab later on to pay out compensation to people who were wrongfully removed, because Priti Patel needed to keep racists and bigots happy. Even though racists and bigots are never happy. Swift said that there was a material public interest in allowing the Secretary of State to be able to implement immigration control decisions. He also said that some of the risks of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda outlined by the claimant were very small and in the realms of speculation. I don't think this judge understands Rwanda very well, but Patel will see this as a significant victory following concern that the offshoring plan will be stopped in the courts. The government has claimed that the plan is designed to deter migrants from making dangerous channels. So, once again, we're going to send you to Rwanda. That's the deterrent. But don't worry, Rwanda's a wonderful place. Dangerous channel crossings and to break the business model of people smugglers. The Home Secretary welcomed the court's decision, saying people will continue to try and prevent their relocation through legal challenges and last-minute claims, but we will not be deterred in breaking the deadly people smuggling trade and ultimately save lives. Once again, I said before, if you want to really break it, you create safe channels. But you don't want to create safe channels because that would piss off the racists and bigots. You know, the people who backed Brexit and continue to back Brexit. Johnson also welcomed the ruling, saying we cannot allow people traffickers. And this is about people but you're sending the You're not sending the people traffickers to Rwanda, you're sending the refugees to Rwanda. It's like saying to people who are starving, if you steal bread, I'm going to cut off your hand. And it's like, yeah, but I need to steal the bread because what's the other option? Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, said the UNHCR's criticism of Priti Patel's Rwanda scheme today is damning, warned about lack of proper treatment of refugees in Rwanda, and accused the Home Secretary of misleading people on UN support for the scheme. Labour has made clear that from the start that Priti Patel's Rwanda plan is completely unworkable, extortionately expensive, unethical and profoundly un-British. The decision will not stop individual asylum seekers from further legal challenges and to their removal to Rwanda and the judicial review of the policy, which Swift said could take 6 weeks. So on Monday we're going to see, as I said, the outcome of this, whether the Court of Appeals overturns it. I would imagine it would, but then, you know, I didn't think this would be, I didn't think the government would win on this. I didn't think Priti Patel would be celebrating today. Stagehand, thanks so much for that super chat. I hope this is stopped and the poor people don't get sent to a country that everyone knows is an unsafe nation. The UK has become people traffickers. And in a sense, yes, in a sense, thanks for that super chat. In a sense, it is. It is people trafficking, because you're not permitting people to make an asylum claim in the UK. You're taking people and shipping them to Rwanda. This is, in a sense, people trafficking. Rwanda is a high-end paradise tourist destination, allegedly. Yes, allegedly. It's once again, it's an attempt just to keep racists and bigots happy, who will never be happy. These people will be happy for about 5 minutes, and then they'll be complaining, oh, yeah, but they're still here, or there's too many of them still here, or you'll have Farage. Roshin says, I saw a clip of Farage and GB News regarding this, and a racist audience clapping. Farage was so excited regarding the prospect of all of this. He's disgusting. His racism started this. He tapped into nastiness. And I think he's seeing it as, okay, it's working, so I can do a victory lap. I was the one pointing the finger at the boats. I was the first one. I was the one who highlighted this problem. I need to be thanked for all the hard work I did, making the lives of these people as miserable as possible. I'm the one who, harassed people as they were, in their boats or in hotels. Remember me, remember me. This is Farage. He wants his attention. He wants his 15 minutes of fame. in regards to this. So once again, obviously if it gets stopped, Farage will be angry, and he'll be angry at Priti Patel, probably. Britain has a long history of pushing people into areas that they didn't want to go, unfortunately. Is Priti Patel useless? Not just a case for Rwanda. It's pretty useless, not a case for Rwanda. Can we apply for asylum from the Tory government? I think so. It's becoming a dictatorship, so yeah, definitely you can apply for asylum. So I just want to move on, of course, to... Well, we're going to keep an eye on this story. It's probably on Monday it's going to be... send the DUP to Rwanda, 2 birds, 1 stone. The DUP are not too happy at the moment because they were hoping that this Brexit bill would do some damage, but it doesn't seem... It keeps getting pushed out, getting pushed further and further away. So just on that, the bill on overriding Northern Ireland Protocol to be published next week. So it should have been published weeks ago. It should have been published this week. Now it's going to be published next week. Draft legislation to be issued Monday, as Keir Starmer promises a Labour government would repeal laws if it passes. Look, this bill is not going to be... So this bill is being presented as... I don't know, a way to force the EU back to the negotiating table, so that they will, in a sense, renegotiate the withdrawal agreement or the Northern Ireland Protocol. But the problem with all of this is that it will be, the House of Lords are not going to accept this type of bill if they believe that it undermines the Good Friday Agreement. So it's going to bounce back and forth between the House of Commons and the House of Lords, and I still believe that Boris Johnson is not really interested in actually pushing this through. He's more interested in using it as a distraction, and it can, and like Article 16 before, it's a useful distraction. I'm going to, get rid of the protocol. I'm going to bring down the protocol. I'm going to thrash the protocol. I'm going to tear it up. I'm going to renegotiate it. And as we saw with last year and the year before, last year in particular, with Article 16, it was every week, Article 16, Article 16, Article 16. And what? It came to nothing. Number 3, the NHS seems to be coughing and spluttering. And Gareth says, Farage, fascist, is a narcissist, plain and simple. Yes, Farage is a narcissist. He just wants more and more attention for himself. I try to starve him of the oxygen, which is attention, but sometimes I just can't. I have to respond. I'm sorry, and I know a lot of you don't like to see Nigel Farage appearing, especially on this channel. But sometimes when he says certain things, I feel like I have to respond. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. Thanks also to Gareth. The NHS, it's... Once again, it's this idea that, and I think it's all by design, the idea that we're going to defund it so that it doesn't work to people's expectations. If it doesn't work to people's expectations, then we can present an alternative. An alternative being a Netflix model or something like that, which I'm going to talk about later in the stream. But this is part of the privatization. Yes, we want to create a sort of model, a bit like in the United States. Although if you ask people in the United States, are they happy with their healthcare system? Most of them will say, no, I'm not happy. The fact that, things like you have to be on a particular service, and if you're not on that service and you have an accident, you can be charged more for healthcare because you're not within the network. Maybe you can't even get treatment if you don't have the right doctor. So if the doctor's not on the network, you can't get treatment. Or you can get treatment, but you're going to pay a lot more for it. The fact that you need more, if you don't have health insurance, you're really frigged. And even if you do have health insurance, it only covers certain things, and it only covers up to a certain level. This is what the Tories and their backers want, and I'm really upset the fact that there's certain right-wing think tanks who are being continually invited onto channels like the BBC, even LBC as well, and they're going unchallenged, and nobody's asking them who's funding you, who's backing you, why do you support the privatization of the NHS under what you call reform. Who are your donors? Because that would give us an idea of why you're pushing the idea of the privatization of the NHS. But we'll talk a little bit more about that after. So it says here, legislation to disapply parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol will be published next week, but senior government sources acknowledge it's going to be a difficult process to get it through Parliament. The new laws, even though Boris Johnson is an 80-seat majority, the new laws are aimed at unilaterally changing parts of the protocol to make trade easier between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. But critics say overriding the post-Brexit treaty could contravene international law, only in a limited and specific way. The bill will be published on Monday, along with a legal document that the government hopes to address some concerns. A senior government source denied that the legislation has been substantially changed as a result of lobbying from the hardline Eurosceptic right of the Tory party after a meeting between Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, and Bill Cash, one of the ERG group backbenchers. Oh, God. And this is something about Liz Truss. She's as how do you say, flexible as a piece of pasta, I don't remember, spaghetti or whatever. She'll go into a meeting and then she'll go into a meeting with one opinion, come out with the complete opposite. She can't stand up to people like the ERG. She can't face them down. Why? Because she used to be a Remainer and now she's a Brexiteer. And she wants to keep these people happy. She's not a leader. Can you imagine her in charge? I would even say she's almost... I'd almost say she's worse than Johnson, because Johnson, in a sense, will face some of these people down. Because if it doesn't suit him, he'll face them down. But Liz Truss is not. Liz Truss will just bend whatever way the people in the room want her to. That's not a leader. Yoni, thanks so much for that super chat. Ask UUP to nominate the Deputy First Minister. I really don't understand why they don't do that. They could call the DUP's bluff. Say, okay, if the DUP don't want to join the Assembly, we'll join the Assembly instead. But then the DUP will say, oh, but you're not the largest party. Because it should be the largest party from the Unionist community. I think that's why they want. But then the DUP could vote against that. Or just, like, if the DUP don't want to join, they shouldn't be allowed to stop the Assembly from forming if there's another Unionist party willing to step in. Or they get involved themselves. But they shouldn't be allowed just to stop it. The source said that there shouldn't be any big surprises, adding that we engage all the time with MPs across the party, and the ERG had not had particularly privileged access. No, I don't believe that. They said the legislation would include practical, reasonable solutions to fix parts of the protocol, including to fix bits that don't work, including east-west trade, governance, dual regulation, and state aid. However, the source said no vote for second reading of the bill had yet been scheduled, and they acknowledged how difficult this is going to be, with legislation expected to be harder to get through the Lords than the Commons. Yes, because the House of Lords are going to say, no, we're not, thank goodness for the House of Lords from time to time, because they are the ones who will not bend to Boris Johnson's will. And, in a sense, they could say, well, remember, the withdrawal agreement was part of Boris Johnson's manifesto, and now he wants to change the manifesto. We can't support that. Liz, trust me, trust economical with the truth. Thanks, number 3. Yes, extremely. She's the the minister for economy of the truth. She doesn't. She has no real backbone. She has no real. How can I say? Integrity, because she. Back in 2016, she was a supporter of remaining in the European Union. She gave some very, very interesting and very correct speeches. The information in the speeches were correct. She described some of the problems that would happen if the UK left the European Union, about trade, how things would be bad, how the UK would struggle to get access to workers, to the goods that they need. And then she flipped, and she was challenged about it, and she said, well, people are allowed to change their mind. No, people are not allowed to change their mind, or something like that. Why aren't there even unions? Why are there even unionists still? That's an interesting question. Why are there still unionists? I understand that there are people in Northern Ireland who would prefer to maintain the union. That's understandable, but the problem I have is with the likes of the DUP, who truly have this position. They hate the EU and they hate Ireland more than any love they have for the union. So their hatred of the EU is stronger than any love of the union, and they've demonstrated that on numerous occasions. Anyway, get back to this. Another senior government source said it would be difficult to see how ministers would be able to publish a bill that satisfies both the Eurosceptic right and the One Nation wing of the Conservative Party. Keir Starmer has said that that a Labour government would repeal the legislation to override the Northern Ireland Protocol if it passes. The Labour leader said his party would vote against the legislation, and if he gained power he would scrap it, while acknowledging that there are issues with the protocol, which is blamed for slow movement of goods across between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK since Brexit. We would scrap the legislation, and I think there has been an impasse in the negotiations because we haven't seen the high levels of trust that we need for negotiations like this, not least from our Prime Minister, he said in Belfast. Which is correct. Yes, there is a lack of trust. How can you trust Boris Johnson when he says that he's going to break international law? How can you trust Boris Johnson when he's saying that this is the greatest deal in history, and then he's scrapping it, or attempting to scrap it, and he's trashing it a few years later? And how, but the biggest problem I have with all of this is that it's clear that the protocol is in a sense the best of both worlds for Northern Ireland. And Boris Johnson will never say that. And I really wish a journalist would ask Boris Johnson, is the protocol the best of both worlds for Northern Ireland? And leave it at that. Don't go into any more detail, just leave, is it the best of both worlds? And if he says, no, it's not, then explain how it's not. Because how is it that Northern Ireland's economy is performing much better than any other part of the United Kingdom, with the exception of London? So any other part of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland is doing better. How is that possible? Well, because of the protocol. But the people who sold Brexit will never say that, because they would have to admit that, yes, it's working. Why is it working? Because Northern Ireland has access to the single market. So access to the single market is a good thing. Yes, but that runs contrary to Brexit. So they will never admit that Northern Ireland is doing well because of the protocol. Scotland would love a protocol, I agree. Many parts of the UK would like a protocol, but they don't have that privilege. He won't answer any questions. Yes, he'll just mumble and talk about the fastest vaccine rollout in history or something. But Keir Starmer said, but also we need to give and take on both sides, the EU as well as the UK, to be flexible about the approach. I do not think that the remaining issues of the protocol cannot be resolved with a different approach, and that a high level of trust with an honest broker Prime Minister getting people around the table and negotiating what needs to be negotiated. Look, the EU has said, look, we're following the letter of the protocol. You know, we agreed to it, we signed it, and we're upholding our side of the bargain to the letter. Boris Johnson doesn't want to do that. And I understand that, you know, Starmer can't be seen as throwing the UK government under the bus here, because the other side is the European Union. It's different if he's criticising, you know, the UK government on, for example, the healthcare or on something else, because there isn't another side. And, you know, there's still a lot of people in Britain who hate the EU, and some of them are Labour voters. So in a sense, he has to be seen as saying that, yeah, the EU needs to be flexible, and the EU need to come back to the negotiating table, and the EU need to bend a little. When in reality, you know, you either agree with something or you don't. And we've already seen the EU compromise on things. We've seen them extend the grace periods. We've seen them reduce checks. Up to 80% of checks have been removed. But as I said before, the problem is not checks, it's the paperwork, it's the declarations. Because the checks are not the big problem here, it's the declarations, all the documentation that has to be prepared. And you have the DUP focusing on the checks and not the declarations, and you have Boris Johnson talking about defending the Good Friday Agreement when he doesn't even actually understand what it's about. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. UK court, first Rwanda flight can go ahead by the end of June. As the UK court, we will provide the full review by the end of July. Anyone else think that the logic here is a bit freaking backward? Yes. Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to send you to Rwanda by the end of this month. But don't worry, we're going to review whether that was a good idea or not. I will release that information at the end of July. So can I come back? No. No, you have to stay there. But it could be good news for somebody who, you know, maybe who would be likely deported in July or maybe in August, because we'll release our information in July. So for June and July, you're in serious trouble probably. But maybe in August, if you arrive in August, you might be a bit more lucky. Thanks to that super chat, Gareth. But yes, it's a little bit backward, just a little. Starmer's trip to the island of Ireland involved meetings with the Irish government ministers in Dublin. The bill has been the subject of fierce lobbying by arch Eurosceptics in recent days who want the protocol dropped entirely. The same people who cheered Boris on with his oven-ready deal. Isn't it amazing? The ERG were cheering Boris on, oven-ready deal, and now they're saying, oh yeah, he has to get rid of it. Throw it in the bin. Boris Johnson and other senior ministers have been under pressure by the ERG MPs to put forward legislation intending to take primacy over the protocol and removing the role of the European Court of Justice. The EU has hardened against the UK's actions in recent weeks, with the Irish Taoiseach warning that ditching the protocol would be a historic low point in relations, citing the Ukraine war as a reason why international law must be respected. Look, I think from the EU's point of view, Boris Johnson may not be around for a long time as Prime Minister. So what's the point in, you know, negotiating with him? What's the point in giving into concessions? What's the point in trying to make him happy when, you know, in a couple of months he'd be replaced by someone else? So if I was the EU negotiators, or if I was Maroš Šefčovič, I would say, okay, I'm just going to sit on my hands for a bit. Just wait, because, you know, if Johnson is gone and he's replaced by maybe somebody a bit more pragmatic, then we can have a better discussion. or even if he's replaced by somebody even more crazy, well, it makes sense to deal with that person. What's the point in dealing with somebody who's going to be out the door in a few months' time? And Johnson will probably be out the doors pretty soon. He's lost so much support. It's not just with the public, but also within his party. And with these by-elections coming up, it's going to be embarrassing. Micheál Martin said in an address to European Parliament this week that breaching the protocol would make the world less safe and that Johnson must not treat lightly peace on the island of Ireland. Johnson doesn't understand peace on the island of Ireland. Conor Burns, a minister for Northern Ireland and an ally of Johnson, said the UK government was recalibrating, not tearing up the protocol. The legislation is also opposed by a chunk of Johnson's own MPs on the One Nation wing, and the former Treasury Minister Jesse Norman warning on Monday it may be illegal. So it would be wonderful if this was defeated by a combination of Labour and Tory rebels, and Boris Johnson was sent back to the drawing board. But the way out of this is to put pressure on the DUP and say, okay, DUP, if you don't want to go into government, what we'll do is we'll rule from Westminster. We'll put in laws that you don't like, and then the DUP will go into government with Sinn Féin. It's quite easy. I posted a link of what Richard Murphy was saying about Fishy Rishi in Discord. I'll check that out, Chris. Thanks so much for that. Johnson doesn't care about embarrassment, and I doubt Tories have a spine to kick him out. But here's hoping. Look, I don't think the protocol or anything like this is going to bring down Johnson. It's going to be these by-elections, and if there are more, in the pipeline, these are the things that are going to damage Johnson and force him out. Because as I said before, if the Tories are suffering as a consequence of Brexit, Brexit as well, but Boris Johnson, they're going to remove him, because he's supposed to be their winner. He's supposed to be there to represent victories for the Conservatives. But if he's not winning them elections, then what's the point in him being there? Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Did you hear about the Orange Order, Max, singing sectarian songs one day, then wondering why the BBC has dropped live coverage of the 12th? Yes, this is amazing. Thanks for reminding me of that, Gareth. Yes, I saw that today on Twitter. So, for people who don't know, the Orange Order is a Protestant-only organisation. You should do some research on them. They're a very interesting organisation. They commemorate the 1690 Battle of the Boyne, where William of Orange, I think, or Orange, maybe it's just Orange, defeated James II, who was a Catholic king. And ironically, King William got backing from the Pope, not the Vatican, but the Pope at the time, because the Pope didn't like people richer than him, and it was likely that King James was going to be richer than the Pope, so the Pope didn't like that, so he backed it. The enemy of your enemy is your friend, and allegedly King William was gay, something that the DUP are not big fans of, to put it mildly. But they celebrate King William, and they celebrate his victory in the Battle of the Boyne in 1690 by marching in places that people don't want them to march, and they sing their songs, which are the KKK with bowler hats. Yes. They sing anti-Catholic songs, they sing anti-Irish songs, and stuff like that. And recently there was an event following I think it was it wasn't the Jubilee, it was the centenary of Northern Ireland, and some guys were in a hall. It seemed like an Orange Order hall, and they were singing a song and I covered it in one of the live streams about a lady who was murdered while she was on holiday, a Catholic lady. Her father was, I think he was involved in Gaelic football, but they were singing about her death, and they were recorded, and this video went viral, and some of them lost their jobs over it. I think they were not too happy about it, and now the Orange Order is complaining that the BBC are not covering the 12th of July celebrations of the Orange Order. So the Orange Order's biggest celebration of the year is the 12th of July, commemorating the defeat of James at the Battle of the Boyne in 1690. So they have big marches all over Northern Ireland, also in other parts of Ireland, and also parts of Scotland as well. And if you're not a member of the Orange Order, if you're not a Protestant, it can be very intimidating, and there has been violence, there has been problems at these parades in the past and marches in the past. And the BBC have decided not to cover it this year. Maybe, look, I don't know if it's because of, for political reasons. It could be just economic reasons. It's a cost. And, the BBC is not well liked in Northern Ireland because they believe that they are Romoners and they support the European Union or something like that. The Orange Order are generally Brexiteers for some reason, but they're a very interesting organisation, and they're not very happy that the BBC, which isn't deciding not to cover them this year. Make the KKA look like Quillov's cast friends. The Orange. But it's an interesting story, but we'll see what happens with them. But they're always very angry about everything, it seems. It's 330 years ago. Move on with your life. Never. Why would the BBC even cover this? It is presented. Look. It is presented within the Unionist community as something very positive. It's a day out. It's a family day out. The weather is good. There's music. There's bands. There's parades. There's ice cream. There's sandwiches. Things like that. Within the Unionist community, it's seen as something very positive. They will say, well, there are negative elements within the Orange Order who want to cause trouble. There are people on the fringes who want to cause trouble, and they don't represent the whole of the organisation, and they don't represent unionism. But the problem for me is that the Orange Order represent a type of hatred, a hatred to people who are not part of that whole sphere. I'm not just talking about Protestant or Catholic, because it's not really a religious thing at this stage. It's more tribal, and you can't be. I don't think you can be a member of the Orange Order if you're not a unionist. So you can't say you definitely couldn't be a Republican. So you couldn't be supporting a United Ireland and be a member of the Orange Order. I don't think. If somebody can correct me on that, is it possible to be a Republican? Because if you look inside the Orange Order, they have union flags. They promote. They're called the Orange Order. The loyal Orange Order of Ireland, the Orange Order of Ireland, but they're pro-British. Something I didn't understand either. A family day out. Yeah, fringes. Look, I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. But no, I have spoken to people within the unionist community, and they see the 12th of July as just a day out, a celebration, a bit like St. Patrick's Day parade or something like that. But unfortunately, when you look at the history of the Orange Order and what they actually represent, you can't really say that, because they represent a supremacist Protestant unionist mentality. Like they don't look. They look at 1690 as, yeah, we beat them bad guys. You know, we're not talking about something that's recent. We're not like, I have no connection with people from 1690. It was 100 years ago. I'm joking, but you know, but it's so far in the past. It has no connection to my life today and my identity today and the identity of most people today. Like, you know, 1690 is so far in the past. Why are you commemorating something like that? Or why are you celebrating something like? It's different commemorating, but it's a celebration. Yeah, we beat those bastards. What bastards? You know, you're, in a sense, you're talking about something that, a time that existed before, you know, Great Britain existed. 1690, we're talking about something before 1700, before 1800. You know, another time completely. It's like people, but celebrating in a very political way. It's not just, oh, it was nice, or we are, you know, like Vikings with hats with horns on them. Some sort of weird nostalgia for the past. It's not like that. It's deeply political, which is concerning. Hi Max, good stream. Have a great day. That's all. Thanks so much, Freddie. Very kind of you, Freddie. Thanks so much for that super chat. Have a great evening, Freddie. Peter, thank you so much for that. BBC could replace the soundtrack and have the march to tunes of YMCA and Disagree. Now that is something I would watch. But is there a police? Well, there would be a policeman, maybe from an ex-RUC guy. What were the ones from the from the Village People? There was the policeman. There was the Native American. There was the builder. I don't remember. Can you tell me in the chat the different members of the of the Village People? So if you had if you had the Orange Order dress up as the Village People, then that would make perfect sense. And Dancing Queen. Gareth McDonald, thanks so much for that super chat. As a strict Protestant society, it does not accept non-Protestants as members unless they convert and adhere to the principles of Orangeism. Does not accept Protestants married to Catholics. Okay, so it's a supremacist society. So you definitely couldn't be atheist, an atheist member of the Orange Order. And see, that's what I'm talking about. You know, we don't want certain people in because of their beliefs. Even if they, even if they agree with everything with us, if they disagree on 1%, then we don't want them in. And what, like, somebody's belief in a particular part of Christianity doesn't define if they're a good person or a bad person. It doesn't define how they would vote, be it on Brexit or on other constitutional issues. So I really don't understand this idea that they must be Protestant, they must be Catholic, they must be this, they must be that. Unless it's like the Flat Earth Society, you have to believe that the Earth is flat. Really, I don't understand these types of organizations. Thanks for that super chat. In 1690, so far in the past, even Jacob Rees-Mogg had trouble remembering. Yeah, it's raining men. It's the Loyal Orange Order, so anti-republican, even anti-monarchists, Republicans, anti-monarchists, Republicans in favor of maintaining the union with Great Britain. Orange Order 1690 would be unforgotten past. 1690 is even before Jacob Rees-Mogg's time. Just about. Okay, we got a bit of a tangent there. So guys, before we continue with more Brexit stuff, of course we have our funny video for for a moment, and then we're back with the serious stuff in just a jiffy.
Emotionless greeting, dead eyes darting about. As you can see, on a train, moved into standard class so you don't think I'm a toff. Pretending I'm coming down from the fictional northern city of Wakefield to London to pledge my support today for the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Saying Boris Johnson again. Boris Johnson. Let's not forget what he's had to deal with since he's been the Prime Minister. Momentarily seeming to forget. Move that up. Yep. Suddenly terrible at public speaking. More challenges than any other piece more challenges than any other in peacetime. Trying not to look like this was sent in an email earlier. Definitely not reading this.
Can you just do that bit again?
Yep. Definitely not reading this. Claiming, despite all the odds against us in Parliament, namely a massive majority, despite Remainers, who remain a useful excuse, and despite the media, which should be derided at all costs by any serious fascist, he delivered Brexit. On top of that, asking you to look at the pandemic. Look at it like it's a photograph. Claiming we've delivered a global leading vaccination program. Oh, bingo. Yes, the vaccine which is definitely the Prime Minister's doing and nothing to do with the hundreds of brilliant scientists. And insisting you look at the Prime Minister today, at how he's been leading the way in support for Ukraine and not being... Where is the Prime Minister?
I haven't seen it.
No. And not being massively distracted by his own buffoonery. For anyone playing bullshit bingo, let me get on with the people's priorities. And he got big calls right. Prime Minister Boris Johnson today has got my full support. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll vote for him tonight, yeah?
No, I'm voting against the Prime.
Sounds very much like Paul Scully for some reason. Okay, back to Brexit. London and EU should have. This was a one that came out from left field. London and EU should both have known Northern Ireland Protocol, if strictly applied, was never going to work, says Mandelson. So the British government and the EU should both have realised that the Northern Ireland Protocol, if implemented strictly, was never going to work, Lord Mandelson said today. This was surprising from, a former Tony Blair guy, but I really don't understand this. Anyway, in a speech to the Irish Funds lunch at the Mansion House, Mandelson, a former Northern Ireland secretary, said that as a result of Brexit, relations between the Irish government and the UK government were at the worst since they have been since the 1980s. He said he feared Brexit had created problems that cannot be solved. He went on, however, they can be managed, and in an imperfect world, managing a problem can be good enough. The main Brexit-related dispute between London and Dublin now centres on the Northern Ireland Protocol, and Mandelson implied that both sides were at least in part at fault over the arrangements that they agreed, checks on goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, to prevent the need for a hard border on the island of Ireland, he explained. Wait a minute, before we get to his explanation, this is something that Boris Johnson wanted. The EU had said, okay, let's have all of the UK within the single market and the customs union. And the Brexiteers said, no, we don't want that. So the other option is, okay, then we'll have Northern Ireland have as part of the single market, or have at least unlimited access to the single market, frictionless access to the single market. And Boris Johnson said, okay. And now he's complaining about it. It's not that the EU is at fault here. And I have criticised the EU before. Okay, this is not just me picking a side and saying I'm going to defend to the death the EU here. When it came, for example, to the Horizon project, I believe that maybe the EU is wrong here. So I'm not a sycophant for the EU. But when it comes to this, when it comes to the Northern Ireland Protocol, the EU said, this is what's on the table. We agree to that. Boris Johnson had a look at what's on the table and he agreed to it. And now Lord Mandelson is saying, well, the EU is also at fault. No, They're not. We have a Prime Minister who won office because he opposed a Brexit relationship that could have worked. It is highly likely that the same Prime Minister signed up to the current arrangements in bad faith. It is certain that he has consistently failed to tell the truth about them. But both the UK government and the EU should have known, and probably did know, that this protocol, if implemented strictly, and there is room for interpretation, was never going to work for Northern Ireland. It was always likely to survive contact with reality, unlikely to survive contact with reality, and therefore requires deftness in its application. But how? Really, I'm struggling to understand how he has come to this conclusion. The EU does not do vague things. It wants everything right to the letter. It wants to cross the I's and dots the cross the T's and dot the I's. It's not in the business of doing, let's throw something together and see how it works. This is not how the EU operates. If they didn't think it was going to work, they wouldn't have signed up to it. I think Lord Mandison is confused here. Look, he probably knows Northern Ireland better than I do, because he was Secretary of State, but I think he's missing something. Mandison said the solution would require seriousness of intent and mutual trust from Brussels and London. I do think both sides can find a landing zone that works for Northern Ireland. It would require painful compromise on both sides. It would also be immensely easier for the United Kingdom aligned, if the United Kingdom aligned with EU plant, animal and food safety rules. This, as the EU has offered, would remove a big part of the barriers to trade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain that unionists find so painful. No. See, the problem is not trade. The unionists do not have a problem with trade. The problem for the unionists is that they see the protocol as a stepping stone to a united Ireland, and they want to stop that. Now, they don't care about trade. They talk about identity. They don't talk about, oh, these goods are coming from the EU. They're not coming from Great Britain. That means my identity has been the problem is the goods. No, the unions have always been talking about identity and how the protocol is a stepping stone to a united Ireland. But the protocol is a consequence of Brexit, which is a stepping stone to a united Ireland. So in reality, you would have to remove Brexit, not the protocol. And when we hear about how unionists are hurt, or unionists feel put aside, or unionists feel not listened to, it's because Brexit was the threat to unionists' identity, not the protocol. And unfortunately, a lot of unionists, not all of them, but a lot of unionists supported Brexit. And now in their mind, there's confusion. There's a conflict. Okay, so they're thinking, look, we had hoped that by backing this Brexit, it would create a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. It would bring back the border. And this would strengthen, at least in the short term or medium term, it would strengthen the union. So it would cut us off from the Republic of Ireland. It would close down a lot of this, not trade, not per se trade, but the cooperation on a governmental level that's taking place between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, the two governments there. That's what they wanted to see end. And they were fooled. They were told that this would be a bad idea, and they said, we don't believe you. They bet the entire farm. They bet the farm on red, and they spun the wheel and it came up black. And now instead of admitting that and saying, okay, we lost, we backed the wrong horse, or we bet the wrong colour or whatever, they're trying to salvage something from it. And their idea is that, well, this is going to affect my identity. Of course, they'll never say Brexit is the problem, because they want their Brexit, but they don't want the consequences of that Brexit, even though there was no real other way. And it's quite frustrating because you're trying to deal with people. I'm talking about the UUP, not the UUP exactly, but the DUP and the TUV. You're trying to deal with people like that who live in a type of bubble where it's outside reality. They don't understand. And the rest of Northern Ireland is moving forward, but they're trying to hold it back. A United Ireland is coming no matter what the DUP do. It is. We're seeing, businesses in Northern Ireland are benefiting from the protocol. And I think at the end of this, all of this, the UK government is not going to rip up the protocol. The ERG will throw their weight around. The ERG will try to extract concessions. The ERG care more about power. They're a voting bloc within the Conservative Party, and they want to have a bit of power. And they see that, well, if we can pressure Liz Truss to do something, or if we can pressure Boris Johnson to do something, that's us throwing our weight around. It makes us feel good, makes us feel important. And it will help maybe some of our members in the future, win positions of influence within the party. But when it comes to Northern Ireland, they don't give a crap about Northern Ireland. They never did. When it came to defending the Union or Brexit won on every occasion. And for me, the real icing on the cake was when Jacob Rees-Mogg stood up in the House of Commons last year. And I was shocked when he said it, but he was telling the truth, from Jacob Rees-Mogg. But he was telling the truth. He said that the Northern Ireland Protocol does not affect the constitutional position of Northern Ireland. That's what he said in the House of Commons. And that blew me away, because it was, at this stage, he was basically saying to he was saying, as Bart Simpson, he was saying to the DUP, get bent. You have nothing, okay? You're talking about identity, but your identity is not touched by this protocol. This is about trade. Get Bozo, the lawbreaker, done. Yes. The DUP should change the name to the SAS Party, Sausage and Shortbread Party. The Orangemen have been known for bigoted and small-minded natural gammons. Are bigoted and small-minded natural gammons. Max Mum Olin pushed the peace process in Ireland. Should be turning in her grave. Give Protestants assurance that they have been heard. Go forward. Forget England. They don't care. That's a good point. Anyway, let's move on. Some good news when it comes to Brexit. It seems the penny is dropping, or the tide is turning. Even Murdoch Press is now waking up to the truth. Brexit was an act of self-harm. Even the most anti-EU newspapers are pointing to the policy's inevitable failures. It's time our government admitted the truth. We've seen this already, so I don't know if you've been following The Express, for example. The Express over the last number of days has been releasing some very interesting stories about how Brexit is not going very well. Brexit disaster, Brexit this, Brexit that. Of course, The Express will say Brexit disaster, Brexit disaster, Brexit disaster, and then the next day Brexit victory. So, they're not reliable, but there seems to be something starting to turn. So it says here, the disastrous consequences of Brexit for living standards, for our economic well-being, and for Britain's reputation abroad has so far been obscured by COVID, the war in Ukraine, and headline-grabbing story of our Prime Minister's lack of truthfulness and integrity. But this week, the British press perhaps unintentionally revealed the real world that is emerging as a result of Brexit. While readers of The Guardian have been kept closely informed about the continuing tragedy of Brexit, it's only now that other parts of the British press have begun to consider the truth of its legacy. The economies of 3 of the regions that voted most heavily for Brexit were smaller at the end of last year than at the time of the vote. Wow. So those economies have collapsed pretty much. wrote David Smith in the business section of this week's Sunday Times. Despite a weak pound making Britain's goods cheap for foreign buyers, exporters are struggling, said Jim Armitage wrote in the same paper. First quarter figures last week showed exports of food and drink to the EU were down 17%, or £614 million on pre-COVID levels. Exports to non-EU countries increased by 10%, or £223 million, but not enough to offset the European decline. Yes, we've been talking about this for a long time, how trade with other non-EU countries is going up, but it's not replacing the loss in trade. You can see here, £614 million lost, £223 million gained. And that's not, and it's important to also remember that some of the gains are for larger companies, not smaller enterprises. So when the UK was a member of the European Union, it was very easy for small and medium-sized enterprises to trade, okay? They were able to trade with Berlin as they could trade with Birmingham. But since Brexit, we've started to see a shift to the larger companies dealing with trade, dealing with the most of the trade with the European Union and trade in general, because there are huge costs with trading as a third country, and small and medium-sized enterprises are struggling to deal with these extra costs, and they can't, and they've either shut down their export wing of their companies, or they have closed down completely. Or if they have, they could move some of their operations to the European Union. But if you're a small company, you don't have that sort of availability to those sort of resources. So yes, we're going to see over the next number of months and maybe even years, the blinker's been taken off. Now, it has to start with the media. And we're starting to see a few Tory MPs. Tobias Ellwood, I think, is the one who really broke the ice, suggesting that, you know, it would be a good idea to rejoin the single market. Because the single market is a stepping stone to EU membership. Because if you're a member of the single market, you're a rule taker, not a rule maker. And if a large country like Britain should be part of the decision-making process, and to be part of the decision-making process, to make the rules, because, you know, it's one thing saying to businesses, okay, we're now following EU rules, but what if businesses said, why aren't you making some of these rules as well? There are some ways that we could improve it, but we don't have any input because we're not a member. You know, we could make things much better for us if we were part of the decision-making process. And look, and I said, on how many occasions, wouldn't it be good if Britain was a member of the European Union again? Some countries would prefer not. I understand that. I think it's important to differentiate the Tories from Britain. The Tories are not Britain. The Tories represent Britain at the moment. That will not always be the case. And I think what we're hoping is going to happen over the next number of years is the Tories are removed and we end up with a more palatable government. And I think Keir Starmer really is in the running for that. Brexit was a scam, yes. Apparently Belgians are flooding Spain. Really? I didn't know about that. Oh yeah, probably, yeah, because of the ability to travel. Tories are not Britain, yes. The problem the UK has is the Tories will make an even worse opposition than a government, and Labour is unlikely to be a better government than it makes in opposition. Yes. The problem. This is the problem with the Labour Party, is that they are generally divided and they struggle, and that's why they need to bring in proportional representation. They need to defang the Tory opposition, and the Tories will be, you know, this is probably what will happen, is that when the Tories are eventually removed, if there's an election next year and Boris Johnson and the Tories are kicked out, the Labour Party, with a slim majority maybe, if they're lucky, or in a coalition, will take over. And they're going to deal with the cost of living crisis, with inflation running at 10% or near 10%. Unions protesting because they want higher wages, which is normal, and of course. And then there'll be a honeymoon period which will be very, very short-lived. And Labour will be trying to deal with a disaster that was being handed to them by Boris Johnson. Massive debt, massive poverty, inflation running off the scale. And what are they going to do? They're going to have to increase taxes. They're going to have to borrow. It's going to be very difficult for them to pull the economy out of this hole. And it's going to take years to eventually do it. And by the time they have achieved it, they'll be removed because they were woke, or because they didn't know whether, if men had penises or not, or whatever. And this is the sort of rhetoric that's going to be used against them, and it's eventually going to remove them from power. And this is why it's important that they push to get proportional representation in. It would create real stable governments. It would create stable governments, coalition governments, but they would be forced into a sort of marriage where the extremes are excluded and the extremes are watered down. At the moment, you have an extreme right-wing party in power at the moment. Boris Johnson's party is a right-wing extremist party. We saw at the beginning of the stream sending people to Rwanda to be processed. This is an extreme government. So guys, I want to move on to something that was raised at the beginning of the live stream about healthcare. And it says here, ministers want Britain to be more like Netflix, debt-ridden and fast losing fans. So this is something, it seems, that Sajid Javid was talking about recently, where he wants, the NHS should be a bit like Netflix. Wow. I wonder which of Thursday's developments will turn out to be more significant. Boris Johnson honkingly incoherent speech in Blackpool, or the same day's news that Plantier is now on track to become the underlying operating system for the entire NHS. This globally controversial black box of a company is already heavily embedded in the security, defence and intelligence sectors, as well as in mass surveillance and predictive policing. A number of sources confirmed that the Financial Times that the now frontrunner is to end up as the sole private firm the NHS would rely on vital functions. Once Plantier is in, warned one person familiar with its expansion plans, how are you going to remove them? Anyway, Prime Minister, you were bubbling about something about tariffs on bananas. This is extremely worrying, because companies like this, these private companies, they want access to people's data. If they have access to people's data, they're able to sell this off to pharmaceutical companies, to health insurance companies, and they were going to be able to create healthcare. They would describe it as customized healthcare, but of course at a cost. And it's part of this plan for the privatization of the NHS. Now, my question would be, what is Plantier paying for this access, and who is benefiting from the Conservative Party for allowing Plantier to have this, to win this contract? This would be my question. And this would be, we're talking about massive amounts of money here, and we know that it's somebody's benefiting, and it's really worrying. In a way, when the UK was a member of the European Union, a lot of these large companies, these large enterprises, they were kept out, because the European Union, with all its faults, is very difficult to corrupt. And we saw that with Apple recently. Apple trying to, not saying that Apple were trying to corrupt the EU, but the EU said these are the new, connection cables standards. If you don't like it, well then, you're not selling your products here. And you can't bribe the EU. You know, you can't send a big fat envelope. They don't make envelopes that big. And who would you send it to? Ursula von der Leyen? No. So it's she's not the one who would decide. So, you know, who do you send it to? And we've seen it with Google. We've seen it with Facebook as well. You know, if it's a small country, or even a large country, it's much easier to bribe these the governments of, and especially if it's a government like Boris Johnson's, who, you know, you can buy a Tory MP for £10,000. Okay, so you know, it is relatively cheap, not for ordinary people, but if you're a company, if you're a mega corporation, £10,000 for a Tory MP, they're literally giving them away, you know. But this idea that, yeah, we're going to turn our NHS into something like Netflix. I really don't know where to go from this. Save our NHS, vote for Scottish independence. You know, I'm not trying, because I support Scottish independence, okay, cards on the table, okay. But if you're Scottish and you're looking at what's happening, if you're a Scottish unionist and you're looking at what's happening in Westminster, how do you say, no, we need to stick with the union? You know, no, we don't worry. As soon as Boris Johnson is gone, everything will be better. Is that how they think? Because, you know, I don't think a lot of them, look, obviously some people think, maybe there are some people in Scotland who think Boris Johnson is a great guy and he's doing his best and everything. But, you know, people with a reasonable amount of intelligence, how can they look at this and say, yeah, this is good? And, you know, what's to say whoever... Boris Johnson is a symptom of the problem. You replace Boris Johnson, you're not going to end the corruption. Because this has been going on for a long time. It's been going on before Boris Johnson. Look at David Cameron, for example. So it's not just, oh, well, once Johnson is gone, the corruption will end. This has been going on for a long time, and it's going to go on for forever, it seems. So how can someone who's a unionist in Scotland look at this and say, yeah, we need to maintain this? I would like to ask them, because I don't know how they can look at it and say, yeah, it's good. What drugs are you taking? Even if Labour got in, would they bring in PR? Rather not take their chance. It's independent all the way. Yeah. Labour may say, the problem with I think with the Labour Party is that if they get in with first past the post, if they win a majority, imagine Johnson and the Tories are completely destroyed, and the Labour Party win a majority. It's unlikely, but let's say it does happen for the sake of argument. Do you think they're going to go, now we need to get rid of first past the post? No, probably not. And, you know, there are also Labour MPs in very safe seats. For example, what's her name? Diane Abbott, I think, is in a safe seat. So Diane Abbott probably isn't a big supporter of proportional representation. And you'd need, you know, a significant number of MPs on board if you were to change it. It's not just, okay, the Labour Party generally support PR, that means it's a shoe-in for implementation. No, there are a lot of people in the Labour Party who would be against it because, you know, they would end up losing their seat maybe. And they would not be putting the country, they're not in the interest of putting the country before themselves. People have a strong preference for what they are familiar with. Some Scots are afraid of change and will switch their vote only if they feel that it's the only choice. That's a good point, Mika. You know, it's easy for me on the outside to look at and say, look, this is an absolute disaster. Change is only a good thing. But if you know, it's especially if you're an older person, you're probably saying, look, you know, just stick with the status quo. It's not good, but, you know, change could be difficult, and it's easy just to stay where we are. So no, it's a very good point. Power does not give power away. We must demand PR. No PR, no vote. Good point, Colin. So I just want to move on to the cost of living crisis, because I think this is something that's, it's never going away, it seems, especially under the Tories.
Now, first of all, just get me, if you can, provide us with what Labour would try and do to try and get these two men back. Do you think it's time now for the Russian ambassador to be called in?
Well, this is a really concerning situation.
Sorry, this is a different story. I wanted to talk about the cost of living crisis. I'm going to skip ahead a bit, but this is about, I think they're talking here about the two British nationals who have been caught in, who were captured in Mariupol in Ukraine, and they're risking death. It seems that they're going to be executed by the Russian government. Wasn't going to talk about this because I wanted to talk about the cost of living crisis, but it is a dramatic situation, a difficult situation, and our thoughts go out to their families. These are brave men who have gone into this fight to help the people of Ukraine, and it looks like they're risking their lives even more now.
The argument would be that if you do an emergency budget now and you make, and Mr. Norris, as you know, a budget will be coming in a few months' time. I mean, the argument would be that if you do an emergency budget now and you make changes to how the country's finances look, you'll have to do it again in the autumn, because these issues that we're facing are not going away.
Yeah, well, I think this is going to need, sustained action. I mean, the answer's kind of in the question there. We've just got to ask people, ask our neighbours, ask my constituents, can you wait a few more months for action? The message I'm getting back very clearly is that they cannot wait. So that's why I think we have to act now rather than kind of hoping we can drift to the autumn, because I think that would be really hard for lots and lots of people if we did that.
What about a cut in green taxes? Is that something Labour would support?
Which ones are you referring to there?
Oh, there's taxes designed to make sure that we get to our net zero commitments.
I mean, I think that, trying to address our challenges, there are many ways. I've mentioned a couple that we could use. I don't think compromising on our net zero goals would be the way to do that, because actually what we know from failing to tackle climate change is that that only puts up bills.
Look, removing the tax levy, the levy on these green levies represent a small part of the entire bill. The majority of the cost, the majority of this increase is the actual energy companies charging more money. So it's not so much the tax, it's the actual increase in the cost. So how would you fix this problem? Well, you could nationalize the energy companies. If you did that, then you would be able to set the price yourself, or have a controlling part of these energy companies. Then you could set the price yourself.
In the end, as well as obviously threatening the planet in its existence at all. So I wouldn't support that. I don't think that's the right thing to do. There are other things we could do more quickly. So that's why we should be getting to Parliament, having an emergency budget and doing that.
Let's move you on then, if we can.
In a sense, providing extra support for people. A UBI, maybe, that would be a good way to deal with this rising energy. If you give people £1,000 a month, that would help them a lot in their dealing with this rising energy cost. And the great thing about a UBI is that when energy prices come down again, the UBI would be maintained, so people would benefit even more from it. So during times of crisis like this, people would be guaranteed £1,000 a month, and they'd be able to pay, they'd be able to buy food, and they'd be able to pay their bills. But they'd also be able to work. They'd be also able to, to take advantage of, yes, UBI. I mentioned UBI, so that gets me going. But crises like this, crises like COVID, are, I think, unique opportunities to bring in something like a UBI, Universal Basic Income. I'm not going to go into UBI tonight. I've mentioned it before, but explain it further, Max. This idea that under UBI everyone is given £1,000 a month, irrespective of your income, irrespective of your age. Generally, everyone above the age of 18. And it puts money in people's pockets. People will say, well, how much does it cost? Yes, there is a cost in a sense, but it's not. I don't see it as a cost. I see it as an investment. It's an investment in people. Giving people £1,000 a month, what are they going to do with it? They're going to pay their bills, but they're also going to spend the money in the local economy. Before, during crises like back in 2007, 2008, what did we do? We gave money over to banks, to financial institutions. And what did they do? They hoarded the money, or they used it to buy back shares within their companies or their banks. So they didn't actually use the money to help the economy. They kept the money themselves. And what else did the government, many governments do, was they imposed austerity, which is the opposite. They took money out of the economy. They reduced public services, so it made it more difficult for people. This is not the way to deal with a crisis. You need to give money to people. People will drive the economy. The local economy as well. If you have an extra £1,000 a month, if you're on £1,000 a month and you're given an extra £1,000 a month, maybe you'll start a little business. Maybe you will spend money more in the local economy, buying coffees or, going to the restaurant more often or something like that. If during an economic crisis, during a cost of living crisis, people are spending less money, so they're spending less money on going to their local coffee shop or to a restaurant or bar or whatever. They're cutting back on that. And what does that mean? It means those enterprises, those companies, those businesses suffer. So they end up laying off staff and they close down. How is that a good thing? But I'm not going to go into the whole details of UBI. That would be for another time. We could do it, and I have said before that I want to get somebody on who's an expert on UBI. And I promised, and I will not do a Boris Johnson and break my promise. Anyway, let's move on. Rising cost of living, a worry for 77% of adults in Great Britain, says ONS. More than 3/4 of adults in Great Britain are worried about the rising cost of living, with about half of them doing so almost every day, according to research by the Office for National Statistics. Maybe start a YouTube channel extolling the benefits of UBI. Good idea. There are some UBI channels, but Max, what's that? I didn't see. Okay. The killer is writing something to me, but I don't know what it is. In a survey, 77% of people over the age of 16 reported feeling very or somewhat worried about the rising cost of living. Of these respondents, 50% said they were worried nearly every day. A separate ONS survey of the same group found that nearly 9 in 10 said that their cost of living had increased, with 52% of the group saying that they were using less fuel as gas and electricity at home, and almost half reining in spending on food and non-essential travel. Max, can you get some professor on who needs to exterminate property speculation and vulture landlords, specifically with the Boris balls in the bricks. Boris balls to the bricks screen. I love that. Yeah, it'd be great to have somebody on who is who can describe what's happening with rising rents and maybe Richard. What's his name? Richard. Oh, damn it! I forget his name. He's a Scottish economist. Maybe I can get him on. That'd be great. Anyway, the anxiety statistics cover a period of 27th of April to 22nd of May, while the ONS survey covered 25th of May to 5th of June, looked at a wider impact of the rising cost of living, including people's daily decisions about what to buy. And as I said, if they Richard Murphy, thanks so much for that. Yeah, Richard Murphy. If people, as I said, if you have less money available, you're going to spend less money in the economy. If you spend less money in the economy, local businesses suffer. If they don't have enough custom, they lay people off, and those people will have to rely on universal credit or something like that. And it's, it become more difficult to start a business because you're going to go, okay, the economy is doing badly. People don't have money to spend. Is it a good idea to start a business at this moment? Probably not. And if you're not, then you're not investing in the local community and you're not hiring people. You're not contributing to society in a sense. This is what needs to be reversed. In the second poll, 88% of respondents reported that their cost of living had increased. It found a proportion of that group who were spending less on food shopping and essentials had jumped to 41% from 36% the previous fortnight, while the proportion of those buying fewer items in their food shops increased to 46% from 44%. And of course this is going to continue because, inflation is expected to hit almost 10% this year. It goes on to say, anti-poverty charities and business leaders have called for low-income families to receive larger cash payouts to offset rising prices. In a sense, a sort of UBI would of course, offer people cash payouts. The ONS anxiety survey showed better off Britons were largely immune to the impact of inflation, while poorer people were more likely to say that they were worried. They were very worried. Only 12% of adults who earn more than £50,000 said that they were very worried, compared with 31% with a personal income of £10,000 or less. Disabled people and parents with young children were among the groups to be most concerned about higher costs of food, energy and petrol. More than 80% of disabled people said that they were worried, 90% of those with dependent children. And this is where the support should be targeted. There should be greater support for people who, if you're earning £50,000 or more, of course you're not going to be concerned about the cost of living crisis because it doesn't impact you. But, if you're below that or, on a personal income of £10,000 or less, any small increase is going to have a huge impact. And as I said before, people who are disabled during the colder periods are running their heating much longer because they can't leave their homes, because they're not able to move around as much, so they feel the cold more. And if these are older homes with bad insulation, they're going to spend more and more money on heating. And also with other items, if they are using machines, devices that consume a lot of energy just to move them around, electric wheelchairs, for example, or other types of devices that need to be plugged in, this is a cost as well that other people, able-bodied people, are not experiencing. And there needs to be more and more support for those people. But it doesn't seem to be resonating with the Tories. This week, as we were talking earlier on about the Boris Johnson's new distraction, which is to, right to buy. Although the cost of homes is somewhat different to what they were back in the 1980s when the right to buy was brought in. So instead, Boris Johnson has this new idea, benefits to bricks, where people on universal credit will be able to have their rent converted into a mortgage payment. Although banks and housing associations have said, no, we haven't been consulted, of course. Dudley Spike, thanks so much for that super chat. In Japan, the government did a Go Travel scheme. This is coupons for bed and breakfast, hotel and restaurants, so people could use their services up to 50%. This is a great idea. And if even if you have some extra money, you're going to go, okay, I'll go and stay in the hotel. I get 50% off. But, when I visit the hotel, I'm going to visit around the city and spend money in the area as well. So this is a good way to stimulate the economy. And, Japan has, maybe you know it better than I do, has been going through a difficult time with its economy over the last number of years and decades. How dare you support disabled people? I'd never be a Tory. If UBI were to replace most benefits, it'd be worth as much as giving full-time, as much as working full-time on minimum wage. The £8 worth of tinned or dry food given at food banks, where you have to queue for 2 hours, testifies to the abuses of the so-called social safety net. Oh my goodness, it's you know, the whole idea of the social safety net being that no one would go hungry, no one would go without a roof on their over their head, no one would go without heating or light, and of course that's all gone out the window. And the worst thing about it is how it's become sort of normal. Oh yeah, lots of people use food banks. The Tories have succeeded in normalizing poverty. They have, poverty used to be something negative, and the Tories have been able to convince the public that it's normal. It's normal that people go to food banks. Yeah. It's normal that somebody who's working for the NHS or a police officer goes to a food bank. That's perfectly normal. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And the fact that they're able to normalize it is amazing. You have to stand back in awe at a party who've been able to convince people that if they're poor, it's actually a good thing. If you have to rely on charity, it's actually a good thing. There's something wonderful about that. It's uplifting, as Jacob Rees-Mogg said. Johnson has exercised his right to lie for years. Not right to buy, but right to lie. Well said. Thanks very much for that super chat, the Freckle Pani. I just want to touch on this story that Boris Johnson, the government's solution to the housing crisis.
Or now by the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, Lisa Nandy. And Lisa Nandy, what do you make of this idea? It is a good idea, is it not, to encourage people to own their own homes?
In principle, it's a great idea to try to get more people the security of their own home, particularly people who find themselves in the benefit system. The problem is that, as always, the government hasn't thought through the detail. There's no sign that any of the lenders are on board with this. The government can say that it wants to open up mortgages to people on housing benefit, but unless the lenders agree to do it, it's not going to happen. There are real practical problems as well. If you're to qualify for universal credit, you've got to have savings of less than 16,000, which mean that most people who the government are trying to reach with this announcement are not going to have anything near the amount that they need for a deposit on a home in order to qualify for that mortgage. The government...
Once again, it's this ridiculous idea that, and I covered it before in a video. Yeah, we want to encourage people to buy homes. We're not going to actually speak with mortgage lenders, because the mortgage lender is not going to give a loan to someone if they believe they can't pay it back. And one way of proving that you can pay it back is by saying, look, I have 10% of the deposit. But if you're looking to buy a home for £100,000 or £150,000, it's very difficult to have £10,000 or £15,000 in the bank. Even if you could, even if you're within the threshold for universal credit, which she said is 16,000, is correct. 16,000. If you have more than 16,000, you can't claim universal credit. But who is on universal credit with £16,000 in the bank? It doesn't make any sense. If you're on universal credit, it's very difficult to save money. It's different if you're working and you have £16,000 in the bank and you're renting and you put some money aside. That's different. But this is universal credit we're talking about. And then there are the practical issues. Yeah, we're going to get. This is of course a way to avoid building new houses. Okay, it's just going to say are you renting? Well, you don't have to rent anymore. You can buy your home. And then what about all the problems that come with that, with home ownership? You have to pay the insurance of the home. You have to pay the maintenance of the home. If a boiler or something breaks, you have to pay for the replacement or the repair. You don't have, if you're renting, the landlord will pay generally, not always, but the landlord will generally pay for that. It's taken out of your rent. So there are costs when you're renting. There are costs that you're saved from than if you are a homeowner. But if you're on universal credit and you're struggling to pay your bills, if you're struggling to feed your family, you're not going to be able to afford a house, even if you're able to meet the mortgage payments.
Does have form on this. They've done it before. They said a few years ago that you wouldn't need a building fire safety certificate on your home.
Mark R says average house buyer deposit around 60,000, I believe, a bit more than 16. I don't know how much the down payment is, but like it must be, yeah, it's probably more than 10,000.
In order to qualify for a mortgage, if your home was below 18 metres, the mortgage lender said, well, we still demand one, and it made absolutely zero difference. So great idea, but absolutely unworkable in practice because the government hasn't, as usual, done the legwork and thought through.
Claudia says, Max, if you're receiving housing benefit, you're not even able to rent a house. Many places will refuse it. Yeah, and this is something that the Tories wanted to bring in as well, or some Tories wanted to support, was allowing landlords to refuse to accept people who are on housing benefit.
The details.
So what would Labour's alternative be? Because we do have a problem with people struggling with home ownership in the UK.
I mean, there are things that you can do immediately. You could speed up measures to crack down on unfair leasehold charges. That's something we're proposing today ahead of the housing debate that Michael Gove and I will be having later today in Parliament. We should be taking more action to increase the supply of affordable homes. In the end, that is the only way to really solve the housing crisis for most people. The measures that the government announced today won't begin to do that for most people, and in fact,
because it's about supply and demand. If you increase supply and it meets demand, price drops. But if supply does not increase and demand increases, then what happens? Prices go up. So even if you are able to, for example, this year, you say, okay, I've jumped through so many hoops, but I've managed through universal credit to buy this, or to get a mortgage to buy this home. It's now worth £100,000, just plucking a number out of the air. But next year, if house prices go up, which they're likely to do, then you may not be able to afford it then. And we've seen this, for example, in Ireland, which is a big problem with housing, where people will save and save and save. They believe that, okay, I have enough money to buy this house now. And then, within a year or two, the house has gone up by 20%. How about the new Tory plan? Not right to buy, but right to save, a pittance more than £16,000. Brexit broke Britain, Boris broke Britain, yes. If they go into administration and snapped up cheaply by the Tory bastards. But the solution is to build more houses. But the problem with that is zoning and permission and planning permission. See, the problem is that, so you think, oh, well, why don't the government just build more houses? The problem is that many people who vote Tory are homeowners, and homeowners don't want the price of their homes to drop. And the price of their home could drop because of two things. One is, well, there's bigger demand, there's bigger supply, so there are more houses available, so the average price of house will probably drop. And that's not good for homeowners. They want their house, the value of their house, to go up generally. Not everyone, of course, but generally that's the idea. Or if there's a lot of social housing that's produced in the area, they will feel that, oh, the value of their house will drop. So they will campaign against this. And the council may say, okay, we want to build social housing, but local residents will block it. and they'll get on to their MP, and they can be very powerful as a lobby. They get, you know, enough of them, and I said this before, I've said this so many times, not in my backyard, exactly. I've said this so many times. 100 letters to an MP is more powerful than 100,000 people marching in the centre of London. I can guarantee it. So if your MP or a number of MPs receive a number of 100 letters from their local, if they're from their constituents, saying we don't like this, that MP, doesn't matter which party they're from, that MP will listen, because they don't want to be kicked out of the next election. And the only people who can kick them out are their constituents. And if enough of their constituents are not happy with that MP will go. It doesn't matter if it's Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer or whoever. If enough constituents are upset with that MP, they will be removed. And the best way to keep your constituents happy is to listen to what their complaints and try to resolve them. Now, of course, it does create conflict between you and your party, but if enough MPs receive enough letters, then they can put pressure on the party to change direction. And I think what's happening in the south of England at the moment is a lot of people are concerned about the levelling up that Boris Johnson has been pushing, and they're afraid that, I don't know if it's rightly or wrongly, but I think some of them are afraid that they're going to see a lot of social housing in their area, and that's why they're dumping the Tories and they're going with the Liberal Democrats. I'd love to know how this would work. Is if you're saving automatically, but if receiving benefits, they could cut automatically. How is it possible to pay for it after? I'm not sure. Kenneth scored a flat in Edinburgh, but I can get a house outside, so I have to travel to work now, and I'm paying more just to go to work. Yeah, this doesn't make any. There needs to be affordable housing in city centres, in places where employment is. So near factories, near industry, this is what is necessary. It's not possible that people say, okay, you know, I work in London, but I have to live in Oxford, or I have to live in Manchester or something, because and commute. It's not possible. Okay, Manchester is a bit extreme. Maybe Oxford is even extreme, but you know, people need to be near where they work, or give them the option to work from home. But many businesses don't want to do that, and many politicians don't want businesses to do that. It's all coming around to the one thing, isn't it? So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream. Went a little bit over tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. There won't be a Sunday brunch. We'll be restarting again after the summer break. But I will see you next Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. But before we finish, we always have our one for the road. Before we finish, as always, I want to say thank you to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks for all of the super chats, greatly appreciated. And thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Hope you enjoyed this funny video. I'm sure you will.
The thing about Boris is, right, he's got some people who absolutely love him. People like Nadine Dorris, who's in his cabinet, absolutely loves Boris Johnson. She said something recently which I really loved. She said, we all have to get behind the Prime Minister. And I thought, I agree with that. I just disagree about what we should do next. But the other thing about Boris, which I found fascinating recently, right, someone asked him about working from home, because there's still a lot of people working from home, and he doesn't like that. The Tories don't like that, because a lot of them own buildings in the city, so they want people to come back into the city and work from offices. When someone asked him about it, he said, no, you shouldn't be working from home. No. I don't want anybody because it's very important. Because the thing about working from home is we've all had the experience of working from home. I did it. I work from home all the time, right? And this is genuinely what he said. He said, the thing about working from home, the problem is, I don't know, in my experience, my experience of working from home is that you do a little bit of work, and then you have a coffee, Then you maybe go to the fridge, and then you get a bit of cheese, a little sliver of cheese, then you go back and do a little bit more work, you have a bit more cheese, a bit more work, a bit more cheese, have a party, go back to the fridge, a bit more cheese. He was obsessed with cheese. It's genuinely true. He just kept going on about cheese in this interview, about working from home. And I thought, hang on, this doesn't sound like the routine of a Prime Minister. This sounds like the routine of a mouse. And I thought about it. I think it makes sense. I think he might be a mouse in some... It all works, right? Think about it. Number one, he loves cheese. Yeah? Number two, he breathes a lot. And number three, once he's in a house, very hard to get rid of him.
Wonderful, wonderful. So guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you next Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. As always, thanks once again for coming on. Thanks for all the super chats, and thanks to the moderators for keeping the stream on the straight and narrow. Have a great night. See you soon. Take care.